morning. Welcome to the February 8th meeting of the Chestnut Hill Rotary Club, the greatest Rotary Club in the world. So wonderful to have such a full room. We have many guests. So rather than going through all the names, please know we're so pleased to have you with us, both online and in person, and we are in for a treat.
Thank you and good morning. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and be your speaker for today. As Jay mentioned, I work with the Philadelphia Police Department, have been doing that for the better part of about 23 years now. And one of the things that I wanted to speak to you about is the connection between the work that I do and the involvement that I have had over the years with Rotary International. My start with the Rotary Peace Fellowship program, when I found out about it, it was through the efforts of the Rotary Club of Philadelphia, meeting with, asking for, and being granted an opportunity to meet with then Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey. And Charles Ramsey, Commissioner Ramsey, once he was told about this program and it was explained to him the value that it potentially could add to members of his department and how they could, extend that to the police department, he was very, very anxious to participate and put out a call for applicants for the Peace Fellowship in 2010. As soon as I saw that, that was something that I jumped on. That was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity I considered, and I was very fortunate to have been selected by a committee that was put together by Commissioner Ramsey to select a candidate from the police department to be sent to, as an applicant only at that point, to Evanston to be considered for the Peace Fellowship, which accepts at most 50 applicants a year, 25 for each cohort. There's 2 cohorts a year that would travel to Bangkok, Thailand. Chulalongkorn University is where I studied. And, what's the connection between Rotary International and Chulalongkorn University, which I found out once I got there is really the Harvard of Southeast Asia. It's an amazing, very prestigious university. And if you are in that part of the world and have a degree from Chulalongkorn University, that really opens up all sorts of doors. They have every school imaginable within that university campus, including medical, engineering, business, everything. But the connection, and so Rotary had a section there within the university to deliver the peace and conflict training program. And the reason why they had that there is because a past president of Rotary International, Bichai Ratakul, who is from that part of the world, very influential member of Rotary, and also many connections politically. He was, if I'm not mistaken, held an ambassador politically to, he was either the minister of government relations with the world. So someone might know. Does anyone here know about Bichai Ratakul's background? Okay, but at any rate, very influential member of the community, of Thai government, and also a Rotarian. He was able to secure a location there. By the way, there is a tremendous presence of Rotarians in Thailand, of all places. And one of the reasons for that is, and this is kind of an aside from what I wanted to talk about, but one of the reasons for that is back in the 20s and 30s, as Rotary was spreading its message worldwide, there were a couple of Canadian Rotarians, one by the name of Abramson, I believe was the name, who traveled to that part of the world and had an opportunity to speak to some of Thai royalty at that time. I think he was a prince. And because of Rotary's message of peace and goodwill, and there was a connection between that and an overlap between that and the Buddhist philosophy of peace and goodwill, that many members of Thai royalty took to it. And once that happened, then all of a sudden, many members influential within the Thai government and movers and shakers in Thailand became Rotarians. So you see a tremendous presence of Rotarians in Thailand, and I had the pleasure of associating with one of those clubs while I was there. But just a little bit of background there. The Philadelphia Police Department and Philadelphia generally is going through a transition right now. As you know, we have a new mayor, we have a new police commissioner, we have a number of different different commissioners that are heading a variety of different services in Pennsylvania. And I'm very heartened by what I'm seeing. I like what I'm seeing with respect to the commitment of our new mayor, Mayor Parker. I'm very heartened by what I'm seeing from the department's leadership. And I've never been more excited about the direction that the city is going. I really have. And the numbers also show that we're going in the right direction. Just in the short time, and since the new mayor has taken office and the new commissioner was installed, we have already seen a substantial decrease in some of the key measurements within the department, and that includes homicides, which are down substantially, nearly 40%. Now, that's from this time last year, and that's a very big number. That's a very big number. And also shootings, which are down nearly 50%. That's a huge number. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have work to do, but at this point in the year, we're seeing some substantial differences from what we saw in previous years. Now, there could be a number of factors for that. COVID certainly didn't help anything with respect to how people interact with each other and how business is conducted, and all sorts of different things that affected society. But certainly it's nice to know that we are going in the right direction with respect to certain types of crime, the level of violence in this city starting to see a dip, and that's a very good thing. And I'm certainly committed to seeing that continue to go in the right direction. At the end, I'll also open it up for questions. If you have some, you might want to ask some questions about, and I'll be glad to answer them if I can. But a little bit about the current commissioner and his commitment to this city. And by the way, Commissioner Kevin Bethel has been with the department for many years. He stepped away for a few years to take over leadership of school safety, and has now come back and now serves as the commissioner. But back in when I was selected for the Rotary Peace Fellowship, he served as a deputy commissioner under Charles Ramsey, Commissioner Charles Ramsey. So although I have not spoken to him directly about this, when Charles Ramsey formed a selection committee to identify someone within the department that they could put forth as a candidate for the Peace Fellowship, it would not surprise me if Commissioner Bethel was on that committee, or at least had some influence in forming that committee, as he was a very close confidant, deputy commissioner of Charles Ramsey. Commissioner Ramsey also was selected by President Barack Obama in 2016 to co-chair something called the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. And that was a huge, the report that came from that had a huge impact on the way policing is done. One of the things that came from that report was an acknowledgement that policing needed to be a bit different in certain key areas. And a lot of it had to do with the mentality of policing as they delivered services to the community. One of the 6 pillars that came from that police report was the importance of shifting from what was referred to as a warrior mentality to a guardian mentality. And that may seem cliche-ish, but there's actually a lot of substance to that. The way that a police officer interacts with the community, what is the motivation of the police officer as they interact with members of the community, whether it be someone who needs help or whether it's someone who might be engaging in unsavory conduct. In either case, it's important, and it behooves police to approach them with a sense of, how can I look at this more from the standpoint of helping and protecting versus enforcing necessarily. Enforcement is still important, but that needs to be coupled with a sense of guardianship, a service to the community. So that is something that came out of that report. And the reason I mention this is because it aligns so closely with the tenets and principles that I drew from the Peace Fellowship. And that's why I think Commissioner Ramsey was so excited about this, because his desire was to impress upon and embed upon his officers a desire to go into a situation and see how they could resolve it, lowering the temperature, conflict resolution, peace creation was another very important concept. It's not just a matter of removing the conflict, but how can we substitute, after the conflict is resolved, a sense of peace that is more of a positive more of a positive topic, rather than just simply saying, okay, conflict is resolved, but we leave it with nothing necessarily in its place, and without proper care by the parties, that conflict can return. But on the other hand, how can we instill upon those parties a sense that they have power over that situation to create peace within that situation, so we don't have to come back? And that's an important distinction between just simply conflict resolution and peace creation. So these were all things that the Rotary Peace Fellowship was very instrumental in embedding in me, instilling in me. And when I came back to the department after that 10-week program, at the time I was an instructor at the Academy, and every class that I taught, in fact, there is an entire curriculum, a module within the Police Academy's training on conflict resolution. And I wanted that because I had the sorts of insights that I thought could really add value to that module. And there was a little piece of Rotary's training in every single course that I taught at the Police Academy. And, you know, with respect to the extent that I was able, I think I was able to influence a lot of officers for the good when it came to going out there with a sense of service. Because let's face it, a lot of times folks are attracted to policing because, you know, of the running and gunning and, you know, all the action and all that sort of thing. That's all true. And that's a part of policing. You need to have a certain level of courage. You need to have a certain level of commitment to intervening in the lives of people when they are threatened by those that want to take away their peace. But at the same time, there's also another component of policing, and that is, how can I add value to this situation? How can I instill upon the people that I interact with a sense that they too have control over their circumstances, that they too have the ability to be peace agents and change agents in their own circumstances? Because ultimately, police cannot fix everything. We can't arrest our way out of every single problem. We have to, in some ways, see how we can, as we interact with members of the community, interact with the public, create a partnership of sorts so that they're able to be self-sufficient in the way that they govern their affairs. And these are the kinds of principles that I will tell you 20, 30 years ago, we didn't discuss in policing. We just didn't. We didn't talk about alternatives to arrest. We didn't talk about de-escalation. We didn't talk about crisis management. We didn't talk about the role that police officers have in reducing a conflict necessarily. We just basically thought to ourselves, okay, we're law enforcement agencies. We see someone break the law, we go in and we take care of business. Things have changed dramatically since that time period. Now, I'm not necessarily saying there wasn't a place for that, but policing means so much more today. And what police officers need to do today is much more complex than it may have been in the past. And we can talk about, you know, whether it should have always been that way, and I agree that it should have, but certainly today, in the complex society that we live in, with all of the challenges that we face, police officers need to understand that their profession involves more than just simply identifying criminal behavior and making arrests. That's only a very, very small component. So these are some of the things that I took away from the Peace Fellowship. But, you know, I know I only have a few minutes to talk. I've been talking for about 15 minutes now. I know I only have about 20 to 25 minutes. I'll be more than happy to take any questions that you might have. No, but I understand what you're saying. And in some ways, policing is similar to trade work, in that there is a specific set of skills and there's almost a science to it. There is a science to it with respect to what officers need to be doing. So what does a police officer do? Yeah, there are a lot of different things that they could do. Now, a police officer can't specialize in everything. So we recognize that, and especially can we afford to do this in a larger police department like the Philadelphia Police Department, which is the fourth largest in the country. We're about 1,000 officers short, but we're looking to build that back up. And that's something that's a challenge that's being faced throughout the nation with respect to recruiting and policing. But yeah, police officers need to, they need to, and that really is the first skill set, actually, is once you approach a situation, you need to immediately start calculating and thinking about what is it that this situation, this incident needs from me. Does it need the guardian approach? Does it need more of a warrior approach? Do I need to be a psychologist? What can I do? I've always been frustrated by, when I was a young police officer, I would go and respond to a disturbance at a house, a domestic violence situation, possibly where a husband and wife who've been married longer than I was alive, are now seeking police help, police intervention. And, what can I do in 5-10 minutes that I'm there to really, to really make a significant and lasting change in a situation that runs so deep, in so many different ways. But as I continued to develop through the department, and I had even left the department briefly and took a chief's position. I formed a regional police department in Northeast Pennsylvania, and associated with the Wyoming Rotary Club up there while I was there. But I started to see how important it was for a police officer to really read people and see, how can you get the most bang for your buck in the time that you're there in talking with them. And a lot of times, and this is something that I would teach at the academy as well, and any opportunity that I have with respect to talking to officers, is sometimes the most important thing that you can do is really listen, pay attention, and hear what they are saying, rather than simply coming in with, this is how it's going to be. Listen to what's being said. And from that, two things can occur. Number one, you can better address the core issues and maybe offer some insights. But secondly, you can really understand what their needs are, so that we, in partnership with other city services and other professionals, can maybe get them the help that they need. And that might be mental health specialists. That might be a situation where we're dealing with the Department of Human Services, Child Services, any of those areas where we think maybe there might be some help. Because again, policing, for all of its complexities, ultimately its role is public safety. And public safety has many, many faces, but a good police officer and a good department has good partnerships with a variety of different other city services or other municipal services, other government programs that would allow folks to get the assistance that they need to resolve whatever conflict that might be facing them. I don't know if that answered every single question of yours, but the bottom line is really, there's a lot that goes into it, and some police officers are better at it than others. There is a reason why one of the requirements to getting into the police academy, a lot of the requirements have to do with physical capabilities, being able to run, being able to jump up and down, or all of these things, because sometimes we need to utilize those skills, utilize the use of force, how to marshal those skills. But at the same time, we also have a very comprehensive psychological evaluation for police officers. Do they have what it takes mentally to be able to, number one, deal with the stresses that they're going to face, but also, number two, to be able to interact in a competent way with those that might be in crisis. And those are really, really hard sets of skills. And one of the reasons that I became a police officer is because there is an intersection of so many different types of skills that are needed to be a good cop. And it's something that I wanted to do. And I've never looked back and said, I regret this profession. There's other things that I could do. I have other credentials, but I want to stay in this profession. I want to retire from it, because it really, I sincerely believe that a solid competent police department, a good police service in a community is one of the most important things that it can have with respect to adding value to the community. And I know that throughout the past few years, there have been different critics of policing. And unfortunately, you know, I say to people, I said, you know, when you have a negative view of policing, I mean, how can you blame folks for having that when sometimes the media just presents this non-ending catalog of the negative interactions that police have with the public and ignores the thousands and thousands more of positive interactions that police have with the community and the good that it does. Part of that is, you know, news media wants to sell its news media, whatever it is, a newspaper, you know, news shows on TV. So they show the things that are shocking, the things that are controversial, wherein, you know, someone that really resolves a conflict for someone, they get very little airplay. So it's up to us as a police department to advertise those things as well, to show that, yes, police add a tremendous amount of value, rather than all of these negative things. And police officers are human. The organization, I'm always encouraging sergeants, lieutenants, captains, look for opportunities to instill in your officers, in those that report to you, the importance of practicing these skills on a daily basis. On a more formal level, we have a variety of different programs, training programs. One of the things that I was a part of was something called Fair and Impartial Policing. Again, a program that Commissioner Ramsey brought into the department to see how we can make sure that we remove any implicit biases from the way that we do our policing. I was very happy to be a part of that, and I was a trainer in that program as well. So we now also realize that police have limitations when it comes to their expertise in the area of mental health. So in some cases now, when we respond to a situation, it's incumbent upon the person taking the radio call, our 911 dispatchers, to ask certain questions to see if we can identify, is this person experiencing some sort of mental crisis, some sort of emotional crisis? If that's the case, we also have an army of, maybe army is not the right word, but a team of mental health behavioral specialists that we might dispatch along with the police to see if they can also intervene. So we're doing things a lot differently now than in the past. But right from the academy, we have a conflict resolution module that is part of their training, in addition to criminal law, in addition to how to drive a police car properly, in addition to how to handle a firearm police officer. It also includes how to handle the emotional aspects of a police citizen encounter as well. I can tell you that all in all, Chestnut Hill, and that, you know, Philadelphia is a city of neighborhoods, right? And there was a time when, you know, Philadelphia was that small section closer to Center City, and it just kept annexing these neighborhoods as it grew. I can't think of any particular patterns that are out here right now as far as any burglary or you know, any patterns like that. But the 14th district captain, and Rotary, and this is one of the things, as a person who has a good intimate knowledge of Rotary, I encourage all captains to, if the captain has not spoken here, I would encourage him to do so. As a matter of fact, that's a great point, that, you know, maybe that can be one of your speakers. He spends a considerable amount of his time, and all captains throughout the city, talking to community groups, getting information from community groups. And there, in my opinion, there's no more influential a community group within any community than Rotary. So, I'm going to encourage that. But I can't think of anything right now that, you know, you need to necessarily be aware of that is, you know, really pressing. Interestingly enough, day one of the first courses we took in the Rotary Peace Fellowship program is to understand that conflict is not necessarily good. It's not necessarily bad. It just is. It is. The key is how we manage that conflict. First of all, to identify the conflict and to see how it should be managed. And there was a very interesting analogy that was made. It had to do with conflict in many ways that we don't even think of. In some ways, conflict actually keeps us alive. You know, there's a conflict between the gravitational pull of the earth and the sun and, you know, all of these different things that keeps us in perfect orbit so that we can live, so we can sustain our lives. There are a variety of other conflicts that are very good. If we go to exercise to keep our bodies healthy, exercise is conflict. We're challenging ourselves in a way that challenges or puts stress on our bodies in such a way as to have it respond in a positive way. I know that's not necessarily what you're thinking about, but when you think about conflict, it's about managing the conflict. Now, the second point that you mentioned about guns, and I think you made the statement everybody has guns. That's a state by state issue, and I know that this is something that particularly is a challenge here in the United States, particularly is a challenge in the way that the Second Amendment is interpreted state by state. Here in Pennsylvania, we have a relatively broad acceptance of the fact that people can go out and buy guns. In some other states, New Jersey, for example, California, guns are much more regulated. And as a result, gun crimes, you know, the way that they are perpetrated is different. One of the ways that we are addressing that is by identifying, first of all, who are the primary perpetrators of gun violence. And I would dare say that the group that we have here, who are middle-aged persons to seniors, are not the ones that are resolving conflict using guns, right? There's a certain level of maturity that comes with age. There's a certain level of, you know, however we have been blessed with respect to the experiences that we've had that have led us to say, you know what, that is not the right way of life. So we need to identify the groups, which are generally males between the ages of 18 and 30, and see what kinds of opportunities. And one of the things that we're doing is we're reaching out to those groups. And we're doing that not only as a police department, but also in partnership with other NGOs, local NGOs, to see how we can identify what are the needs, what are the areas, what is lacking that causes someone to whether it's a situation where they have turned to a life of drug dealing, or and now they're using gun violence as a way of protecting turf and as a way of retaliation. In some cases, it's as simple as you know, suffering a personal affront, and you know, how dare that person, you know, and social media unfortunately does play a little bit of a role in this, because now they can broadcast to very, very large groups of people an insult, an act of disrespect, and now they feel that their reputation is tarnished, not just on the block, but also in the wider sense, in some cases even worldwide. So because of the reach of social media. So we're trying to identify how we can resolve that. So there's a couple of different things that we can do as police officers. And I'm going to talk specifically about policing, because there's other things that the government can do that we just don't necessarily have control over, but we have what we have presented to us as police officers. And that is to try to basically interact with the groups. I can tell you there are several community groups here within the city having to do with peace creation, and just working with youth. Faith-based groups are in many cases instrumental in reaching kids. Job programs, you know, school programs, after-school programs. All of these things are designed to target the groups of people that are most at risk to being exposed to gun violence as a means to resolve their conflict. So that is a very complex problem, but I can tell you that one of the things that I'm seeing in the last few years that is significant is the police department's realization that we can't go this alone, that we need to work with other external partners, whether it be, again, guidance counselors, whether it be faith-based groups, whether it be NGOs that are formed by concerned parents, to try to reach these folks. And at some point, the ultimate message is gun violence is passé. It's bad. It's just not what you should be doing. It's not cool. It's not fun. I can tell you that there are a variety of different restorative justice programs as well, where perpetrators of gun violence are are put in situations where they speak directly to victims of gun violence, and that's very powerful as well. So there's a variety of different ways that we're trying to address this. So this issue of race, and within the police department, and this is something that, again, is something that probably 20, 30 years ago, well, it just didn't exist, but dedicating professionals within the police department specifically to these issues, which might contribute to broader issues. So for example, within the Philadelphia Police Department, we have a unit called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Unit, which is designed to create programs, identify issue areas where there might be a negative effect of lack of diversity, lack of equity, lack of inclusion, and see how we can resolve those. From a police department's perspective, I think there's a slogan that I once heard. It said, "Diversity is a fact, inclusion is an act." So what are we doing individually to work with others that might be different from ours? As a matter of fact, I once published in a paper that I wrote, and I can't remember where I got it, or if it was partially, some of my thinking, but as part of the way that I conduct my life, I try to seek out people that are different from me and just speak to them, even people that might have a different perspective than I do. Because one of two things are going to happen. Either I'm going to learn something that I otherwise didn't know, which will help me to live my life in a more in a more diverse way, or it will also help me see, okay, whatever philosophies I had, there's some merit to them. Either way is good. Either thing is good. But going back to the program that I spoke about earlier, the conflict resolution program, there's a reason why we had it in Southeast Asia. It exposed us to so many other different cultures. I can tell you, it is far less likely to find someone who has racist tendencies, who has traveled the world, who has been around, who has, gone into a variety of different groups that have memberships of people that, from a demographic perspective, are different than your own, whether it be age, whether it be race, whether it be professions. You get yourself out of the comfort zone. We tend to, and this is part of human nature. We want to instinctively associate with people that think like us. It makes us feel good. It makes us feel that, okay, we're safe. But there's something to be said for kind of reaching outside that perspective and maybe hanging out with some people that may not necessarily think the way you do. And that's, I think, one of the ways that we attack it. And again, not necessarily to toot your horn, but that's one of the things that Rotary does. I mean, it's a worldwide organization. We're looking at things that are happening among a variety of different people around the earth and addressing them. Doctors without all kinds of different things. The way that Rotary assists developing countries, for example, with some of their challenges. And you're going to be hard pressed to find someone that has those kinds of hardcore me tendencies within Rotary. So how can we influence others? And that's what groups like this and clubs like this, that's the value that we add to the community. Stop and frisk is a catch-all term. It's because people want real quick tidbits of things to define very large concepts. The Supreme Court back in the early 60s, through a case called Terry versus Ohio, established that police officers, in an effort toward promoting public safety and thwarting criminal attempts, may use their training and experience and knowledge to do some things that, before they have probable cause that a crime has been existed. Stop and frisk has always existed since the 60s. In other words, in the sense that police officers use their training and experience. If they see someone, and by the way, the case that we're talking about that started this whole thing, the seminal case Terry, had to do with a police officer, a veteran detective, from his car watching a couple of guys, and I'm going to make this this is a real synopsis, a real summary of what happened. Watched a couple of guys casing a joint. Now, when I say casing a joint, that was parlance back in the day, and that was part of the case itself. And he said, these guys are going to break into this store. Now, and he stopped them. And he said, he started asking them some questions, and they were mumbling some answers back at them. That aroused his suspicions even further, to the point where he said, you know what, I'm not sure you guys don't have something on you that might, be used in a crime. So he started patting them down. Lo and behold, he finds a gun, and they're arrested. This case makes it all the way to the Supreme Court. The attorneys for Mr. Terry and his associates said, members of the Supreme Court, is it illegal to walk around on a sidewalk back and forth in front of a store? No. Is it illegal to walk to your car and talk to a person? No. Is it illegal to do, to kind of look around back and forth this way and do nothing else? No. None of those things individually were illegal, but yet it caused a police officer to approach them, ask them questions, eventually put them up against the wall and pat them down. So what happened from that case is something called a totality of the circumstances case, which police can use as a tool to try to thwart crime. And we want that. We don't want to necessarily wait till a crime occurs and then just respond to it. If police officers can be proactive and stop a crime from occurring before it does, that's a win-win. So this whole thing about stop and frisk is simply a law enforcement tool which allows a police officer to use his training and experience to look around and say, is this person about to engage in criminal activity? Are they engaging in criminal activity, or have they just engaged in criminal activity? What cannot be done with stop and frisk is use race exclusively. It can't use race at all. You can't use a person's age necessarily. What you can do is use examples such as suspicious type movements, bulges in pockets, all of these different criteria, which again, in and of themselves, I might have a bulge in my pocket. I might be carrying a softball. I might be carrying, or it might be a gun. But what else am I doing while that is going on that might lead a police officer to develop what is called reasonable suspicion to approach them? Once they approach them, they can do a couple of different things. Reasonable suspicion to stop and question, and that's called an investigative detention. If there's a bit more and there's a belief on the part of the police officer that the person is in possession of a weapon, they can engage in a custodial detention and then do some frisking. That's where the frisk part comes from. The stop is asking questions. The frisk is, okay, so all of these things have been part of the police officer's toolbox since the 60s. It was at least codified by that Supreme Court decision. So this idea of bringing back stop and frisk, that doesn't mean I just go through a room and start throwing people up against the wall and patting them down. Maybe I'll find something, maybe I don't. No. What articulable reasons do you have, officer, to stop someone and ask them some questions? And there's a variety of categories too. There's also something called a mere encounter. A police officer can stop anyone and ask them anything. But if it is lacking reasonable suspicion, that person can say, go pound sand to the police officer and walk away, and the police officer can't do anything. So that's why Mayor Parker was very, when I've seen her talk, she's always talked about constitutional stop and frisk. In other words, using that tool in a way that is consistent with Supreme Court decisions and the law. And when done properly and professionally, it is a useful tool that promotes public safety. I know this is kind of a, I'm kind of using my lawyer hat a little bit and that sort of thing, but it's not this thing where cops are just showing up and just going into a house of ill repute or a bar and start patting people down, hoping that they can find something. The Supreme Court decision was very careful to say you cannot act on a hunch. Specific articulable facts And they must back those up in court, usually during a preliminary hearing, because that defense attorney is going to challenge that officer. What did you have that were specific and articulable facts that led you to stop my client? And that officer better have some very, very clear answers to those questions. If they do, then that was most likely a constitutional stop and frisk. Last question. Let me just say this about Kensington and some of the things you've talked about. I can tell you that from leadership, I know that that is something that's going to be addressed. How can police officers be more approachable? How can they be more available to the community? That's going to include things like more foot beats. It's going to include things like more bike beats, utilization of the kinds of police tools that will allow their presence to be more accessible to the public, more interaction, more communities, and rather than just simply driving by in a car. So that's one thing. With respect to Kensington, what I can tell you is that I know that that is one of the priorities of this new administration. I don't want to speak on behalf of the administration, but you know, some of those things that you just mentioned, I don't know enough about because I have not been in closed door meetings as to what the approach is going to be. I can tell you this as a citizen, what's going on in Kensington is not sustainable. It is not fair to the people that are living there, as well as those that are, you know, find themselves in crisis with respect to addiction. There needs to be something that needs to be done. Now, the approach, and none of this is secret. One of the things that the commissioner has done is appointed a deputy commissioner specifically for the Kensington project. That is Deputy Commissioner Pete Rosario. I know Pete. I know he's a very, very good man. But with respect to what exactly is happening there as far as strategizing, I'm kind of in my own lane over here with my unit. But I'm confident that they're going to bring voices to the table that will be able to address the concerns that you just mentioned. How will this look moving forward? Who is going to be a participant in the resolution of this challenge that's there? So listen, I can tell you this. I'm seeing something being done about Kensington, or an attention being given to it that had not been given to it in the past. And that heartens me as well. That gives me a certain level of hope that we're going to be able to do something positive with respect to that. If you have other questions, by all means, don't hesitate. Shoot me an email, and I'll give you my other contact information through that interchange, and we can talk more about some of these issues to the extent that, you know, we can make sure that you're kept informed of what your police department is doing for you. So with that, I thank you very much.